Let's see.
Hey, Rick. How are you?
Good.
Do we have any other special, just go through, any other special presentations or anything we want to do in the work session?
I think just the budget, discussion of the budget and the moderate income housing plan, depending on if we have time or not.
Why don't we do this then, Sean, or Mark? Why don't we turn the time over to you and you can sort of
Okay,
give us some ideas on
yeah,
how we're going to spend our money,
right.
how we're going to get the money to spend.
So, just starting this budget discussion early this year, we're in October, and I want to make sure that that we are doing what the council envisions. We're all on the same page as far as our goals and visions. So that's just what this is a discussion and what we are seeing as an administrative team. And mostly it's on personnel this year. So, and we can talk about all the other budget items, as we go throughout the rest of this year, but today it's mainly on personnel. As a review, this current budget cycle, the council approved a selective salary adjustment for the police and the public works employees. That was approximately $400,000, and then a 5% cost of living adjustment for all of the other employees. So we increased our personnel costs by about $550,000 with no additional funding sources. And so a lot of these efficiencies that we've been working on and a lot of these grants that we've received and things starting to be used towards the additional resources for the current employees. And so another thing, this is just a review as well. The impact of the selective salaries was about $260,000 out of the general fund. And then the other funds, they're utility funds, and the general fund is pretty much funded by taxes, and the utility funds are funded by business-like operations with the water, the storm drain, and the treatment plant. This is kind of a four-year information slide. The last 4 years, how much the general fund personnel costs are. It ranges from about $3 million to now $3.4 million. So in fiscal year 21, we had one additional police officer, and so that's why it raised about $145,000 that year. Fiscal year 22, we didn't have any additional employees, and it raised by $25,000 just based off of cost of living adjustments and merit increases. And then in 23, it's what we talked about back here with the selective salary adjustments. And
Hey, Mark, is this in?
it is not in there. It's just up here, and I can send it to you. But
You should, after this is over with.
Yeah, can you send it
absolutely,
so I can look at the numbers?
yeah. So going forward, we kind of have a plan going forward, and the first year of the plan is this, and this is for the fiscal year 24 budget. But talking with Chief Cordova, I mean, he could use 8 new officers in the next 3 years was kind of his plan, knowing that may not be completely feasible. We thought that possibly 2 full-time police officers, and I'll pull up the numbers on how much this will all cost, but 2 full-time police officers. The fire department, it has its own funding when it comes to ambulance fees, and it has a funding source. It's from a different fund. The building official and planner were
Placement, right?
so that's not a well, it could be a replacement. We're just now going out to recruit for Steve's position. He's kind of unique when it comes to the position that he holds. He thinks it's him and Grant, or what's the other?
Duchesne?
Duchesne, that has a building official, that is also a building inspector and a planning and zoning administrator. Most have one or the other, or, both. And so we put this one as an additional resource, just not knowing what we'll be able to recruit, if we could recruit another one that has Steve's expertise and skills.
I would still say, what Steve does is building and zoning. He doesn't do a lot of the planning work like the reviews of developments. He facilitates, the review and coordinates review of applications. But I think we're starting to enter into an arena where, because we're a city of a fourth class now, where there's higher expectations and requirements. For example, we were talking about the moderate income housing plan, and creating the plan is just one aspect of it. The state is requiring reporting on that plan annually, and the idea is that you actually have to make progress on implementation. We also have a water plan that we need to now comply with because we're a city of the fourth class. So there's just a lot more, I think,
I just question
requirements.
if there's enough to do a whole FTE, and I'm wondering if 2024 is a little aggressive, if it's not more like 25, or a little bit further out to be expanding that budget. for that
Yeah,
person.
and I think we take a wait and see approach, and we're testing sort of the waters with the type of individual that we could recruit and fill that. But I don't disagree with you, and we could potentially shore it up with contract, like we've been doing with Landmark, who's helped prepare some of the plans. So, and who knows what development's going to do.
Steve's position will be vacant next year, correct?
Right, on, when did he, March? Yeah.
So he's given us a date? Or it's just kind of talk?
No,
No.
he signed a paper today.
So we could go out and actually recruit. So we want to, advertise, recruit, see if we can find someone like that. But, what we're not prepared to do, I don't think very well, is, and this is what Steve's done, is he's answered the questions on zoning, he's helped coordinate, and that takes a lot of time. And usually someone who's into building, knows building, but they don't know zoning per se, and zoning ordinances and things like that. So we'll keep you posted as we go through the process of recruitment. And building permits have tailed off, and I think maybe Mark has a slide
we
on
have a
that.
slide down here that we'll show.
Steve does the building permits? He floors a lot of people coming in just with questions too, doesn't he? Can I do this? Can I do that type stuff?
Yeah, and that's the part. I mean, I feel like I can help with some of the planning, but I don't feel like I can take that task on and still do everything else that's required. And that's what we've done. It's kind of worked out well with Steve handling the day-to-day things and me helping with reviews and being involved. I've been more involved with the planning commission, but still, I'm not sure how sustainable that is as the city continues to grow. So,
This is a public meeting, so I brought up the name of Tom, and I forgot his last name down in Brigham. He was a city councilman.
yes.
Has recently just taken
Tom Peterson?
ferries, Tom Peterson. I was sitting in a city meeting with him a year and a half ago, and he was eyeballing Steve's position. We really ought to be at least contacting him.
I will certainly let him know. He's just on the legislature now.
He's in the legislature.
He's pretty.
New job.
That's not a full-time job, though. He still
Well,
needs to earn money to
Yeah, yes,
put
yes.
food on the table.
That's
No, so about a month out of month and a half is don't know how long the legislative session is. A month.
We were in a zoning and a land use meeting, and the presenters were up front, and he was sitting next to me, and they couldn't answer the question, and then they would refer to him.
Yeah, he's very
We're
knowledgeable.
there.
I was there.
Yeah, he's well skilled, well knowledgeable. I mean, he's
He would like to come up here, so.
What he said.
Yeah, and then water department, that comes from the water fund, that comes from water rates. So We
you
talked about the
mention
water department because, oh, go ahead.
I
What's
was just
that?
gonna say, did you mention about the fire department employees that,
Yeah, that comes out of the fire and EMS fund, which is, the revenues are from the from the ambulance.
Sorry, the water department employee, is that like an assistant to Paul?
Not quite. So we have this 5-year plan. The water employee, we're seeing a lot more pressure because the secondary system, a lot more people are hooking on. And so we basically added a whole new water system without, with continuing on our culinary water system without adding any full-time employees for that. So that would be somebody to go out day to day, running the water utility. and so-
Another operator.
Another operator. So then Paul, he's mentioned in the next couple of years, possibly moving on. So that's where we would shore up his position with him training the current guys coming up and then possibly just seeing what happens when he leaves. But knowing that there needs to be somebody to do these reports that he does that comes and gives the council, the reports and the presentations that he does, and so many things that we would miss when Paul's gone. So that would be probably fiscal year 25 that would be looking for that. So this is the 5-year plan, and again, this is a discussion. If we want to change this up, I want it to be what the council envisions, but this is what Sean and I, mayor's talked, that we've talked to Paul, to the fire chief, the police department, and these are what we would like to see as we move forward. Make sure that all of the departments have the sufficient staffing.
Mark, I love it. And I think it's a great outlook. I think it's a great start.
Mm-hmm.
The little sub-note at the bottom, there are other departments in the city that will need additional staffing.
Yeah.
Like to know who those are and what that is.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Because if
And-
we're going to
and
be going through some
we
kind of,
brainstormed some of them, and most of them are pretty shored up. Parks might be one, as we add, we have the BR Mountain Road Park and the one down south. As we add additional park space, that would be one that we could easily throw on here. And then, but we can do a deep dive.
Yeah, we could-
Along the
Yeah.
budget
So-
process.
can I,
Yeah.
okay, so in 24, we've got the 2 officers and the planning person and 3 EMS, 1 water. And then, so that's a total of 5 slots. But it shows a total of 710,000. And I think the important thing here is that we're not looking at 710,000 in 24. We're looking at from the general fund, we're looking at about 300,000. So what he's done there is he's taken out the fire, the 330,000 there, and
The water.
the water. That's the other one he took out, because those would be funded.
Utility rates or
Through
ambulance
rates.
fees or.
So anyway, I think that's important to an important note right there.
Yeah. Mr. Mayor, I was just going to mention, the other thing that's not on this list, I'm sorry to pass this on to Mark. We'll continue to work through this, but as ambulance billing increases, the demands on Shari keep increasing. And so we're getting to a point where she feels like, and she's going to be working tonight because she can't get all the bills out and do everything that she needs to. So, we've talked conceptually about changing a part-time to a full-time and having Shari really just focus on ambulance billing. And so that's not reflected in here, but over the years, I've seen her, she accrues a lot of overtime and I think just needs some additional help.
having an NPV on something that would probably show that there's not a whole lot of cost to the city because of the increase in revenues from the ambulance, right?
Well,
And you know, and because she's able to spend more time on it, she'd probably be able to recover more money, So it's probably close to a wash, isn't it?
Well, that's what we'll need to explore for sure. And I'm going to be meeting Mark Curtis, and the chief and I are going to meet on Friday, and the mayor, if he's available, and we're going to be talking about, you know, what that fund can really afford and really do. So we'll have a little bit more information after that conversation.
The 710 and 300,000, that's confusing me. Do you need
Well-
710,000
The-
next year? Or do you
No,
need
that's what I was trying to
410?
explain. So the total of all of those slots, that grand total comes up to 710,000, but the water and the fire, those two would be paid out of,
There's different funding resources for each one of these.
so the fire
Almost
would
each one of
be
these.
the EMS, the ambulance.
Police is pretty much straight paid for by taxes because they don't recoup any money.
So just to cut down on the confusion, you've got GF there for general
General
fund.
fund.
You'd want to put EMS at 330 and
Okay.
fund.
To add up to
Fund,
the
the
seven.
EMS fund.
Water at
And there's no
80.
questions what's going
Or
on.
that. Sure, we could have done that. And so what we'd have is the difference, the 410,000 would be money that would come out of
310 would be,
rate structure in the ambulance and that kind of thing.
yeah, I can do that. I'll add that to it.
And then the following years, is it all out of the general fund?
It's not, we just did this first year.
Okay.
But the funding source on the right-hand side, that will tell you which ones come out of the general fund. So an assistant public works director would probably be split third out of the general fund, a third out of the water, and a third out of the treatment. But other than that, they all come out of a specific fund when it comes to their wages. So all the police comes out of general fund, streets comes out of general fund, planning and zoning would come out of general fund. So.
I think you're going the right direction. It's just a very confusing what's coming from where, and so we need to kind of
Yeah,
make that a little easier to
It's
understand.
defined where it's coming from. We just don't know how much.
Yeah.
Yeah. We can cheer it up, and when we send out the slides, it'll be a little bit clearer.
For example, on the 25, then there would just be the one position, and a third of that would be, so you'd take a third of the 100,000, 33,000, and, sort of take that off the 380 right there, so you can see what would have to come from the general fund.
I think what's confusing me on this is there's revenues coming in on some of these departments. Is that subtracted out of this? That, for example, fire department is going to be, they receive revenues, right? How much of that revenue is going towards these new firemen? And how much is it that we need to supplement to get them up where they need? We need to know what the supplement is, right?
Right.
Okay, so let's just take the 24, and correct me if I'm wrong on this. So the 24, we're looking at, each of those slots would be 110,000, so 330,000 would be, and that would come out of the fund, out of the
Yes,
fire.
and that's what, the fire department, we just hired the full-time. We don't have a long history on exactly how many, or how the revenues compare to the expenditures. We're getting a better history on it, and that's what Sean was saying. We're gonna meet with Curtis and the chief. And if that fund is healthy and strong, then all of that money will come out of the fire. But we have to analyze that completely. And then we talk about, how much do we want to save in there for their capital expenditures? Because they still have ambulances to buy and different things. So can we use all of their fund balance to go towards new employees, or do we have to save some for their capital expenditures, and how much are they making each year? So we're still working on that. But as of now, we would like to see the fire pay for the new firemen.
Yeah, I would just say, we're real early in the budget process, and so this is going to be an iterative process. So your feedback is really helpful for us to refine, and we'll refine the slides and see if we can get more information on what the outlook is looking as we move forward.
Now, if I may, with something like this, I mean, if we're going to start projecting a plan and possible tax increases or whatever over 5 years, let's throw everything in it, like roads. Are we going to try putting aside a little bit more money for infrastructure and those kind of things? Because if we're going to go to the table and say, this is how much we need each one of these years, it'd be nice to know what that total package is versus this is just for employees, and then we sit down and have another discussion on
Yeah.
roads. You see what I mean? And I know this is early, but
Yeah,
I would
this is-
throw all that into that 5-year plan. I know that's a lot of work.
Well, we do have a capital, we'll tool our capital spreadsheet up, but one of the things that might be helpful for you to ask and tell us is how much you feel comfortable increasing taxes by percentage.
Why don't we go through this and then let's answer that question when we get through this.
We know that we need additional staffing, and so we need funding for it. We talked about what we have done in the past, and I'll go through each one of these, but in the past, we've tried to find efficiencies everywhere we can go, everywhere we can. And we know there's more out there. We're continuing to find them. We've received grants. We've adopted the highest allowed tax for energy tax by law that the law allows. We are doing well on sales tax, but that's somewhat out of our control. If we create a good community, then hopefully people want to continue to shop here and buy here. But I think the economy kind of determines that one more than anything. Utility fees, that's what we talk about with the water department. If we need a new FTE there, then we can look at utility fees for funding of the water employee. We've done an exercise where we took our largest vendors, the people we pay the most money to, and we're going to look for maybe some systematic changes that we can make to lower our expenses to those vendors. We've talked about the business licensing, and we increased business license fees for a majority of the businesses. We did not for say the hospital, and I think that was like a $25,000 annual fee. So we're gonna look into business licenses. We talked about some of the efficiencies that we have instituted, and again, the $380,000, it helps, but a lot of the times that money just goes straight to a project, or that money makes the community better by adding something to the community. It doesn't necessarily mean that we have $380,000 in the coffers that we can just use towards this, but every bit helps, and that's what we're trying to show here. When it comes to corridor preservation funds and the street lighting upgrades that we've done, transportation impact fees, we never charged a transportation impact fee before, and so we're doing that now, and we're recouping a little bit, and every little bit helps. Some other efficiencies that we've instituted. This is going back, many years, but we're still realizing some of the benefits from them. We implemented a transient room tax. We've changed healthcare providers, which was a kind of a systematic change that I have on a slide later on. It shows that we saved money annually doing that. We're continuing to reach out to senior centers, city councils for the senior center. We've saved money by safety measures on workers' compensation, but that's also up and down, because if we have big accidents, then that hurts in the future, so not super reliable. So anyways,
Go back to that just for a second. On the Box Elder County one, we've billed them for that additional amount. And it looks like that's going to go through. So when we go talk to them tomorrow,
What time's
it'll
that
be sort of the Box Elder County.
I think 11:30.
For the food pantry, or for the senior center. Looks like that
48.
money's going to come through. So it'll be kind of a going there and thanking them for,
22,000 or 2,200?
That's 1,000. So they were paying us 35,000, 36,000. And now that was before we initially approached them. And then they were paying us 53, and now we've approached them again, and they'll pay it'll be about 62. So. These are some of the grants that Chief LaCroix helped with on the left. Some planning grants on the right that staff has worked on. And again, it's just ways to make our departments better, more efficient, saves money, makes it safer for employees. And some of it goes towards saving money in the end. But a lot of times we implement new programs with the grant money that we
the
receive.
time frame on this was this fiscal year.
No, this goes back,
Goes back a ways.
yeah, a little ways. So previously I said that we were going to work with some of our larger vendors. This is kind of how much we pay out to a few of our vendors. Select Health is our insurance provider. And down at the bottom, that's kind of our medical insurance renewal history. And you see in 2020, that's when we made the change to go from Cigna to Select Health. So it just goes to show that there are ways that we can make systematic changes or organizational changes and save money going forward. And that's what we're committed to continue to work on.
And that's also when you guys, when we changed how you received insurance, as you know, and that was a big savings, you know.
Another method is we talk about a lot is the property taxes. If you remember property tax dollars, they're a revenue-based tax, and so we know exactly what we're getting, but that tax it only increases when property values increase. And so if we don't, or if we accept the certified tax rate, then we'll be realizing the increase of what the property values increased.
And just to clarify, it's not necessarily property values, it's taxable values. The amount of or the amount of value of property that we can tax, because property values increase and decrease, and that's where the certified rate adjusts.
Yeah, and it's not just, it's personal property and real estate property, so for the businesses, it's their machines and things that they have. When you look at a total property tax bill, we're about 20% of somebody's total property tax bill is what goes to the city, roughly. So this is a history of our property tax since 2010 or 2012. You'll notice there's been 3 large increases. One of them is because the Multi-Mill RDA, the values came back into the city, and we realized that property tax. The next one was when West Liberties came in, and then 2 years ago we went through the truth in taxation process. So a lot of talk's been about growth and how much we're going to receive just based off of growth and new property values. So I kind of tried to line up these 2 slides. The bottom one is our building permits. Blue is single family detached, red is multifamily attached, and that's the number of units. That's not necessarily the number of buildings, it's the number of units. And you can see that we receive the most in new growth because of the industries. So 2012, again, 2012 was Post and 2018 was West Liberty. And that's why those two are so high.
Do you think that, on 21 there, do you think that lags a year before we realize?
Yeah, so they take the property value as of January 1st of the year. And so you may have issued a building permit in 2019 and they don't start building until, the end of 2020. And so the property value is not necessarily higher at the very first of 2021. So I think it does lag 1 or 2 years. But most of that 310 and 98, the last 2 years, are captured in Tremont Center RDA. And so we'll see 25% of most of that new growth.
I do think one thing is, if you just look back on the history of new growth, 19, less than 100,000, 20, it looks like it was, I can't really read that, 50,000-ish. So there's not a tremendous amount that is generated from new growth, realizing we've had some big years, but and as Mark mentioned, some of those big years that we've experienced taxable value increases are within the RDA boundaries, which the RDA will realize, that new growth.
I found this pretty interesting. I went back and looked at every town in the county and looked at how many times they've gone through truth in taxation since 1997. And so that's the chart on the left. The chart on the right is who went through it just this last year and what percentage they increased and what that amounted in new revenue. And you see that we are on the lower end when it comes to how many times we've increased, as well as the lower end on how much of an increase. So I thought that was valid information to
Good
share.
information.
That is great.
Yeah.
And then another source of revenue is the sales tax. As we know, the state, their intent for sales tax is so that cities can finance their capital outlay requirements and service their debts. And so we have our Utopia debt, and then our capital outlays is our transfers to our capital funds. And so this is, over the past 10 years, this is how much of sales tax revenue we actually did transfer. The purpose of sales tax is to transfer it to our debts and to our capital funds. And sometimes we're hovering around the 100% mark, but I don't know, I'd say average is about 75% is what we transfer over. So anyways, that's what I have for today. Any further discussion on this?
I just have a question. So on the police,
Is 2 enough? Is that what you're gonna say?
no, no. I know we want a total of 8, but is that based on if growth continues the way that it is currently?
8 would put us, well, we're with Garland, so 7 would put us right now, this instant, at where we need to be with the, I think it's like 650 people per
Oh,
officer.
okay.
But that's a great question. Projecting growth into 5 years, will these numbers still be accurate 5 years from now?
No.
And those need to be included in this.
You're just being kind to us and saying, I'll do this in little segments to get me where I really need to be.
And same with.
That
all
was
of
my
the
question. But really,
Good.
all of those are needed immediately.
Yeah.
If you could have exactly what you wanted.
Yeah.
Look at the 2 bobbleheads in the back.
But you're willing to do it piecemeal, right?
Yeah, are you talking to me, Connie?
Yes, I am, sorry.
Sorry, I was like, answer. Yeah, we want to work with the city. I mean, ideally, we could get our staffing to where it needs to be. And I'll talk more when it's my time, but we have other challenges up against us as well, and that's filling those allocations. So in a perfect world, if you were like, hey, we support you, here's 8 allocations, could I fill those allocations? The answer is no. And I had a rude awakening today with that.
Yep.
We've been doing an active recruitment for the last 3 months. We had somewhere around 30 people put in.
Yep.
We checked in throughout that time. We had today's date to test, yep, 4
Four.
people showed up. Of those 4, 1 passed the physical, and that gives us a projection. The reason we have that test is we need to know that they're going to be successful in the academy, and they wouldn't be unless they could pass that minimum physical standard. And then from there, we give them a very entry-level written exam, and we end up with 0 today. Nobody passed the written and the PT. We had one guy go on to the next phase, and he just didn't end up being it. So we're back to square one, which is frustrating.
But as I read through the great information that you passed on to us, you said that most didn't even show up.
Correct.
They showed intent, but they didn't actually show up to actually be interviewed.
Yeah, and that's a trend we've seen in law enforcement and nationally as well. It's just the temperature to be a police officer is very cold right now. It's a selfless job. They frankly aren't getting paid enough, as we all know, for what they do and the risks they take. And it takes a special kind of person to not just be physically able, but mentally able to be successful. It's a position of a lot of power and trust. And so we can't lower our standard. And as your chief, I'll never do that, because I wouldn't do that to my community or my city. And frankly, I wouldn't do that to the city leadership either. We have to maintain that standard. So we need to be attracting the best possible officers, and that's going to come with being competitive in the market right now. And right now, while we have made leaps and strides and it's helped us keep what we have, it's just we're not where we need to be to attract the type of candidates we need to attract. So that's another issue. We have, I have solutions, but it's going to involve that financial contribution. We're just going to have to get closer to the market. And I'm working on getting an idea of the pay scales from our surrounding agencies that we're competing with, and that way I can give you those numbers as well. I will say this, it's not my time, but I'm throwing it out there. I do have a great qualified candidate that is able, if we had an allocation, I could pick that person up right now. I just don't have an allocation. And my fear with that is if we don't act on the market when it's available, we're gonna lose that opportunity. That's my fear. As I said, we went through 30 people, 0 came out. We have one that's qualified, certified, and can start, and willing, and they're not chasing the money, which is very appealing to me as a chief. They're chasing a sense of community and service. And we could talk more about that person offline, but I think we would be remiss, and it'd be a failure on me to not share that information. If we can find any wiggle room, I absolutely recommend we make that happen, if possible.
I would think that your media report today would possibly attract people that have those kinds of hearts because of the way you portrayed what we do here in Tremont and how we feel about our community. You did a great job. And I would think that would attract those kinds of people.
Yeah, I appreciate you saying that. And yeah, it's a tough deal. It's hard. Go ahead.
So I got to ask you, help me understand what you said. Are you saying if I had the funding, I could make the offer? Is that what you're saying?
Correct.
Yes.
So I have a limited number of staffing spots available to me. We're at that max in Tremont. We have 2 empty allocations in Garland, the goal of today's tryout was to fill those. We have people that are loyal to Tremont that wouldn't necessarily be interested in those Garland spots.
So the Garland spot is the one that you're interviewing for today?
Correct.
Okay.
Those 2 spots. Now, with that said, we are paying the same, and we are matching, like, we're all equal at this point. That's a huge success. And I'm really happy that Garland's helped us out. We are like a family right now, and I'd like to continue to have that relationship. But long-term, you know, I don't know what to say with that. We do have this person, and they are willing to come over and work for us, and it's a great opportunity. But they will not work for Garland, they will only work for Tremont. There's a sense
Okay.
of loyalty and respect there, and I understand. I just don't have a spot to give them. If I did, I'd hire that person in a second.
But we could give you that spot.
That would be fantastic.
That's basically what you're saying.
Absolutely.
Could you please give us a spot?
Well, we need,
Please.
we need to make sure we got the money.
Yeah.
Oh, I know, but that's what he's saying.
I say we do
You were
it.
saying go, and I'm like, ah.
No. No, I'm just saying, he's waiting for us to give him the go-ahead to free up a spot. Right now, he doesn't have a spot because we haven't freed anything up.
Gotta figure some sort of a way. Well, yeah, holy cows. Council, do you have any other questions for?
I just want to go back what Connie first started talking about, you know, down at the bottom here, you would want to put based on and I realize nobody can come up with an exact figure of how much Tremont is going to grow in the next 5 years. But I mean, 5% growth, 7%, based on 7% growth, the police right now need 8, so in 5 years, they're going to need 10.
Yeah.
I mean, that needs to be part of this thing too. The fire department, we really are just looking at what we need now, trying to spread it out over years. But in 5 years, what position are we going to be in again?
Yeah.
So,
Like that.
And we can definitely do it. We have a pretty good growth projection based upon historical trend with a really good trend line. So we'll show you that, and we'll do our best to sort of add that into. It's a
you get
great
nervous
comment.
about that because if you take a look at last year, that's going to be a anomaly. type
It,
thing.
it is anomaly. If you look at this right here, that's what you're seeing right there. Now things are tapering off again. And, you know,
So you got to bring that down to, you know, you got to show some type of growth, half of that at least.
well, and so we're 3%, 6%, 5%, you know, it's kind of what we're,
Can we go to the slide where you show what
210 to 220 was
we've
about
done, what
3%.
other communities have done? That one. I asked the question earlier, and
What is that? What is that?
Which one?
You got it. You moved it.
Go ahead, John.
I was just going to say, part of it, because you have the political realities of having to increase taxes if that's a big piece of this plan. And so one of the things that might be helpful for us as we think through, the plan and the timing, is how much you really feel comfortable increasing by percentage. Because as you know, in the truth in taxation process, we have to give notice of what the increase, how it'll affect the average homeowner and business as far as increase and a percentage. And this gives you a good idea of what other communities have done around the city. Is there a certain level, and you may not be able to answer it now, but is there a certain percentage that you feel comfortable in increasing? The last one we did was a 10% increase,
I think it
Mark?
was 9. And so that 12% is the budgeted revenue from the year before the truth and taxation revenue. So it was 9% plus about 3% in new growth. So that's what the 12%.
Which equaled about the new growth, or the percentage, 200,000.
This is neat information. It is. It's awesome. But it doesn't tell us what we need to know. I mean, if we have a 50% tax rate and every other city around us is at 20%, I'm not willing to go any.
Well, the
But if we can't be raising our taxes so high, people can't live here. And it's going to be easy to go back and say, a like city like us has got a tax rate of 23% total, and ours is at 20, that gives us a little wiggle room of 3%. And that makes, and I don't know,
Yeah, I hear what you're saying. I think the challenge is the tax rate will jump all over the place to equal the revenue that cities need. Does that
you
make
said we're at 20%, right?
20%
Of
of
the
your
county,
total
of the
property
total
tax.
Yeah,
Full bill is 20%.
Okay.
20% of the total tax.
yeah, our tax,
We find like numbers to someone else, and
Well,
I'd love you to prove
other
that we're
counties
low.
have different taxing entities, and
Well, it's-
based
it's-
on where you live in the city, you might have
So-
different taxing entities. And
So, based on the numbers and that type of stuff, I mean, this is one angle to take a look at it, but the real question here is what we've been asking is, what is the need? What is the need? And then if you can help us understand why we need to get that excess money that we're not getting through normal funds,
yes.
then we can answer the question how much we're willing to raise taxes by if we can see that there's a need. I mean, my job as a city councilman, this is, I don't know how everybody else feels, but I need to protect my constituents, that I'm using their funds correctly. And I just can't arbitrarily say, well, everybody else is charging this much, we're going to charge the same. No.
Yeah.
We got to answer what is the need. Then we can go back to our constituents and say, we have a need because we don't have enough police, we don't have enough fire, and this is why, here's the numbers, and this is why we're increasing. So your question is like way before.
So yeah, that's helpful, and I want to have these frank conversations, and I'm not trying to paint anyone into the corner or back them into the corner. And just like we have challenges of understanding what we're going to do in the future, what things are going to be, I know you do too. I just say that I kind of lost track of what I was thinking, but I guess I do remember it was essentially where are we at in the point in the process, because you talked about you need to tell us and demonstrate that there's a need. Chief Cordova's presented, and we talked about the policing need. We could have the fire chief present. I felt like we were sort of a little bit beyond the why portion and onto the how.
It's not the need of them, it's where's the dollars? I mean, how much do you need?
We can see there's a need.
Yeah.
But what's the dollar amount?
Yeah.
We haven't even started talking about streets in this
Yeah.
situation either.
I
And
mean,
that's
are we going
major,
to, do we
so-
need more, do we need more infrastructure?
Yeah.
There's a lot more than just this, and let's get it all out there. And
Well, we will-
we need 1.3 million a year added to what we're getting now. That's the figure I think that we're after.
Right.
And then we can come in and say, if we're going to get to that figure, it's going to take a 14% hike this year. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
And
yeah,
then,
I do.
Then all of a sudden, the picture is very clear.
Yeah, we will work on the capital spreadsheet. We'll do just as you asked. This is really helpful, so we know how to prepare the information.
And, I know we planned for streets and those, but are we going to ask a little bit more? I mean, our infrastructure's kind of needs some help. So do we need a little bit more money to get that going? We need to discuss all that and just say, okay, here's our total need over the next 5 years. That's what I'm after.
It's really going to be interesting when we see this study done by the university on what's needed and that needs to be all put up here so that we can see what the total amount is.
And so we're talking about all these different needs and everything, but there is different funding sources. It isn't all taxes. Part of it's sales tax, and there's fees, and there's rates and everything else. There's lots of different funding sources. And maybe just kind of, we got to see that too. You can't just see the expenses and then, and equate it all to just one funding source. There's all sorts of funding sources here that need to be sort of brought into the picture too.
Yeah, we'll do our best to
Yeah.
do the next iteration a little better.
That's a good point because, maybe in water, over the next 5 years, we're going to have a rate increase here and here. What's that going to impact this bottom line?
Right.
Yeah.
I know it's a lot of thinking, but boy, that would be awesome.
Well, we are working on utility rates, looking at what's comparable where we're at. I mean, I feel like water, without diving in, I just sense the need to address it based upon sort of the drought, the revenue, that we've lost because of conservation. There's a bunch of factors and growth. We budgeted impact fees to help pay for the bonds, which I think was reasonable to do to some degree, but that's a growth-related revenue that's going to, be affected by how many building permits, and building permits, I think, are a little less than we had projected at this point.
Good start. We got the greatest of faith in you that you will, now you see what we're wanting and you guys can make it work.
Yeah, no kidding.
It started early.
Yeah, well, that is part of the goal here is to not wait until,
Crunch.
Crunch time and then try to figure it out. Because I think there's a lot of, we all need to be brought up to speed and everything, but so does the public.
Right.
And we want to make sure that everybody has a little bit of a say, something to be said about it. And
Mayor. So when is truth and taxation deadlines again?
Oh, it's not until, we've got to declare probably in end of May, 1st of June, and then the truth and taxation public hearing is going to be generally in August timeframe.
Before the notices are sent out.
April. We need to be done with
Yeah, yeah.
deciding what it is we want to do.
Yep.
all right, thanks, Mark and Sean, and
Yes,
thanks
thank
for all
you.
the input, everybody.
Yeah.
It was really good. Thank you. All right, anything else we need to, presentations or anything we need to worry about, right? Or should we just go through the
No,
agenda and?
Yeah, with the amount of time that's left, it's probably,
6 minutes?
or we could break
So
or
much
whatever.
fun, I lost track of time. Okay, why don't we take a little break and then we'll come back, we'll start at 7 o'clock.
That old guy doing that there in the audience, he gonna come and tell us.
We're missing Rick. All right. We'll give it a minute here. This is one of those times when silence can be loud, huh?
So if I swipe my card. Oh, wow. I don't think I'll swipe my card. I might pay for the last guys. Whoever the last guy was. Oh, yeah, they would.
We'd like to welcome everybody out here for our Tremonton City Council meeting. We have, we're going to get started with our opening ceremony. I've asked Rick Siemens, our council member, if he'll give us the opening prayer, and Lindsay Nesson to lead us in the pledge. So we'll, Rick, you want to go ahead and?
Sure.
Thank you.
You do, yeah.
Our Father in heaven, we're indeed grateful for the opportunities we have to meet this evening as a city council and as city members. We're grateful for the freedoms which we enjoy, for the great land which we live in, and the opportunity it provides us to express our opinions and to enjoy the freedoms which we have. We're grateful for the opportunity to be together and discuss things that are pertinent to the city. Help us to do it in a pleasing manner. We might be cordial and respectful to each other and might have thy spirit to be with us. We're grateful for all which is ours, for those who work and serve in our city. Make it a fine place and bless those that are working, that they might have thy spirit to be with them and might do the best of their abilities. And we pray for these things in the name of Jesus Christ. Amen.
Amen.
Stand and repeat the pledge with me.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Rick and Lindsay. I'd just like to introduce our city staff and any guests we have with us here, or with our city staff. We got over here Sean Warnke, Wesley Stepp, council member, Connie Archibald, Lyle Vance, Brett Rohde, Rick Siemens, Lindsay Nesson, recorder, Paul Foljam, Dustin Cordova, our police chief, Robert Lacroix is back. Must have been a quick run. Our fire chief, and Mark Christensen, and our guests from the university. We're glad you're here with us today, and we're looking forward to the presentation. So there we go. Council, we've got an agenda before us here. I'd entertain a motion to approve the agenda.
I'll make a motion that we approve the agenda in front of us tonight.
Been moved by Connie, seconded by Rick. All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. Approval of the minutes from October 4th, 2022, council.
I'll make a motion, we approve the minutes of October 4th, 2022.
I'll second that.
Moved by Wes and seconded by Connie. All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. We have a proclamation here this
Well,
evening.
you did forget declaration of conflict. I don't think there is one, but you skipped that one.
Oh, I did. I surely did. Council, we do this every time if there's a reviewing the agenda. If there's something that there's a conflict with, we need to declare that conflict. Council, any declaration of conflicts? Okay, moving back down to the proclamation. Domestic Violence Awareness Month, New Hope Crisis Center. That's me. That's you. Yeah. Come on up and you can,
Hello. So my name is Megan Talamontes with the New Hope Crisis Center. I'm the executive director. I brought our grant writer, Carrie Vincent, with us for some support. But as you, hopefully know that October is Domestic Violence Awareness Month, and I kind of wanted to share some stats with you of what our agency has done over the last year. From July 21 to June of 22, our staff members responded to 3,994 crisis calls, which came out to about 1,700 hours of advocacy. We served 524 women, 71 children, and 219 males who were impacted in some way by domestic violence, child abuse, dating violence, or stalking. Staff provided assistance to 49 victims of sexual assault. 7 of those victims were children, and 40 victims were children who had experienced physical child abuse. Staff members gave 2,149 community referrals. We provided services to 318 victims within our justice court. We sheltered 55 women, 13 men, and 23 children for a total of 2,893 bed days. We've also been able to reach 8,076 students through our educational outreach program, so that's going into our schools. So that's just some of our stats. I've brought our proclamation, and I'd like to read that if that's okay. It states, whereas one in every 3 women in Utah will experience domestic violence during their lifetime. Whereas victims should have help to find the compassion, comfort, and healing they need, and domestic abusers should be punished to the full extent of the law. Whereas fleeing domestic violence has caused women and children to be the fastest growing homeless population. Whereas Domestic Violence Awareness Month provides an excellent opportunity for the community to recognize this issue and the many victims of this terrible crime, and to show support for the numerous organizations and individuals who provide critical advocacy services and assistance to these victims. Therefore, I ask Lyle Holmgren, Mayor of Tremont, and I urge you to consider this proclamation and make October Domestic Violence Awareness Month.
thank you. And do we need a motion on this?
Was that
We ought to
numbers
have
in
a
the
mo-
county or the city?
We cover all of Box Elder County.
All of Box Elder.
County, okay.
Council?
Do you want a motion? I would make a motion this evening that the month of October 2022 be deemed Domestic Violence Awareness Month.
Council, we got a motion and Rick, a second with Rick. All in favor?
Can
got
I
it.
present that proclamation to be signed?
Yes,
by
right now, if you want.
Okay.
We'll do it. Thank you for all you do.
Thank you.
Okay, Years of Service Award. We have Kylie Sedgwick. Could you come up? Come on up, Kylie. Did you want to present this?
Yes, Kylie, thank you for coming. I'm going to have some of your family and kind of do a little show and tell tonight. Kim Griffiths is our director of our library, and she's unable to be here tonight. And so she's asked me to excuse her and tell, and I just want to tell everyone a little bit about Kylie Sedgwick. She is assistant librarian at our library, and I'm not going to tell everybody how old you are. She's young. But she stated here, she's written this out beautifully for me, but she's married to her best friend, Tanner. Tanner, would you stand? Well, you know who you are, but you're right there.
There you go.
Okay. And she has an 11-year-old little girl named Milo. So Milo,
11 months.
11-month, excuse me, 11-month-old little girl, Milo, right there. Kylie loves to spend time with her family outdoors. She likes to read, of course, and she likes to do crafts, and she loves relaxing whenever she gets a rare chance to do that. But a few other things about her that maybe we ought to celebrate tonight is her favorite work project is working in the children's program. Wow. She mentioned that recently there was a STEM class of which she headed up, and it was one of her favorite things to plan. A fun fact about her: she has 2 different colors of eyes. So she has one eye that's blue and another eye that's green.
Everybody's
which
looking at your eyes now.
I think that's really kind of fun. Her favorite quote: "Be fearless in the pursuit of what sets your soul free, sets your soul on fire." So, Kylie, thank you for 5 years doing a great job in our library. We appreciate you so much,
Absolutely.
and we're so happy that you're here. Is your mother here?
Yep.
And your sister, or?
And my sister. Yep.
Thank you, and Tanner, thank you for supporting your wife in her efforts at our library. So I have a little gift certificate for you. So thank you so much. Keep up the good work.
Thanks, Kylie. Okay, we have a presentation from Courtney Flint. Her survey on Tremont's 2022 well-being report. And I think we'll just turn the time over to you now, Courtney, and
Thank you.
tell us how we're doing.
Great. Thanks so much for having me here. It's really nice to be with everyone here and to see all of you. Nice to see you again, Councilwoman Archibald. And
Yes.
we just saw each other yesterday at a Bear River presentation. So, yes, I'm so thrilled to have Tremont as a partner on this well-being project. We've been operating for a while. It's always great to have new people join us. Apologies for the date on that. Clearly incorrect. We can get that fixed. But so great to have you as a partner here. The project really covers the whole state. We do surveys in cities all over the state and have for a few years. Our goals are really, first and foremost, to live out the land grant mission of the Utah State University and really provide what we can and listen to our residents and to our leaders and try to put those efforts together to meet the better needs of the states. So we try to provide city leaders with information on the well-being and the local perspectives of their residents to inform your planning processes and general decision-making. Of course, it's also a research endeavor. We're interested in understanding well-being and how it varies across communities and over time. And increasingly, we're focused on bridging the efforts between our efforts with the Department of Health here in Utah, Department of Transportation, the Get Healthy Utah program, and the Huntsman Cancer Institute's become interested in all of these data. So hopefully we can scale this up and do good things. The reports for this year are all online on the website. You can just Google Utah Wellbeing Project, but there's the website right there. Tremont's report is online, general report. And so you can see that Tremont is one of a number of communities that's been involved here in the northern Utah area. So the survey we do this online, and it's a no-cost partnership with you as a city partner. And the way we can make that work is that the cities lead the recruitment and advertising for the surveys. We feel you know best how to reach your residents, and so we really rely on that partnership. You guys take care of getting people to respond, and you did a great job your first year with 337 respondents with viable surveys in 2022. Great effort, makes for nice representative data. We do ask quite a few demographic questions in the survey, and this is because we want to be very transparent about who we hear from and who we don't. With any kind of survey effort, there's always a source of error, no matter what kind of survey you're doing, and so we want to be very transparent. We had about 97% of full-time residents of Tremont average length of residence was about almost 20 years, and 23% had lived in Tremont for 5 years or less. So we are picking up some of your newcomers with your rapid growth here. The survey does underrepresent some groups. More women took it than men. We underrepresent the Hispanics and Latinos, those without a college degree, those who are unmarried, those who rent, those who are unemployed, those without children, those with the lowest income bracket, and those of the youngest adult age bracket. So it's not that we didn't get any of them, it just doesn't match the census data necessarily for your area. So just getting right into the data, we found personal well-being to be above average compared to not only other folks in the rural caucus group for the Utah League of Cities and Towns, but across all of the cities in the study, still above average. So really exciting and nice to see. And let's see, if I go back, the average was a 4.1 on a scale of 1 to 5. So it's really excellent, with 82% of the people saying a 4 or 5 on a 5-point scale about their overall personal well-being. Now, we didn't define well-being, because this concept goes all the way back to the ancient Greeks. Aristotle said it was everything that makes up a good life, right? But what that bundle of things is going to be different from one person to another. So we ask this generally, and then as you'll see later, we go into some specific areas to get some coverage. We also ask about how is well-being in Tremont, and if for all cities that comes down. For Tremont, I will tell you that it comes down a lot. So this data shows Tremont a little bit below average, not much below average, but there's a pretty big spread between there. So people taking the survey feel that their well-being is perhaps better than some of the others in their community, or the community as a whole. And so the average is 3.33, and 44% said a 4 or a 5. So what we also do is we ask about these 10 different domains. We ask people to rate these categories as to how their well-being is doing in these areas, and then also tell us how important they are to them. And we see that the highest rated domains, the things that are going the best, are physical and mental health, living standards, safety and security, which, by the way, are always in the top 4 of the highest, or the most important ones. And connection with nature is really highly rated. And then the most important domains are these 4 that I mentioned, and that is very typical of our Utah communities. And then the others, you can still see by that graph in the upper left-hand corner that they're all still actually quite high. It's just relative to one another. That's how they sort out for your residents as a whole. You don't have anything in what we call the red zone, which is that area that's higher importance but lower than average rating. So this is excellent, really. There's nothing there that's screaming out that says this is super important but rated low. And that's exciting, and not all communities are in that position. A lot of the folks have things in their red zone. A couple of things get close. Education, leisure time are kind of encroaching onto that area, so things to keep an eye on if we were to do this over time with you. We also ask some questions about community action, so it's really perceived community action. We ask people in Tremont, to what degree do people take action together in response to local problems or opportunities? And you can see it's a real normal curve there. Lots of folks sort of feel in the middle there. Tremont is really in the middle of the pack when it comes to these Utah cities. But when we look at community connection, how connected do you feel to Tremont as a community? We're just a little bit lower, on the lower side of middle there. And so these may be areas that to consider a little bit moving forward. And one of the reasons is because we find this community connection variable to be very influential, statistically significantly related to overall personal well-being. The people who have that stronger sense of belonging to the community, a stronger sense of connection, tend to have the higher levels of personal well-being. That's a very strong relationship. Well, that finding led us to get some funds from USU Extension, put some resources together, because we had cities saying, well, that's interesting, but how do we build community connection? And so we've put some resources here together, and then we also added to a lot of other categories, connection with nature, environmental quality, safety and security, physical and mental health, living standards, and substance abuse. And these resources aren't out of academic journals. They're really targeted for cities. They come from other cities or programs targeted for cities. There are a few resources for individuals too that you can also share with your residents, and those are all on our website. This year, we asked a question about participation in recreation and nature-based activities. You can see that a lot of your residents really enjoy gardening, or they enjoy the wildlife or birds in their yard or neighborhood. Non-motorized recreation on public lands or waters. Recreating in parks in your city is really quite high. Motorized recreation on public lands and waters is also more than 50%. And even city recreation programs, watching nature-related programs or publications, and walking a pet in the city are still really quite high for these respondents. And interestingly enough, the city, participation in city recreation programs is strongly correlated with higher personal and community well-being. So a nice thing that your recreation programs provide for your residents. Walking a pet in your city is correlated with community well-being. It gives people a chance to sort of feel part of the community. These top three here, these three up here, enjoying wildlife and birds, non-motorized recreation, and recreating in parks in your city, are strongly correlated with community connection, right? So having those parks in great shape really helps with that community connection and just really celebrating the nature that's around everybody. So those were really important findings for Tremont on those connections. We ask about the role of landscape features in your residents' well-being. These natural features, so important to people, you know, from our mountains and our rivers and streams. Farmland, very high here, very much appreciated, including lakes and trails and those city parks, really important for people's well-being. That when you get into the more human-dominated landscape, commercial and manufacturing industry and residential, commercial and residential development and manufacturing industry and extractive industry, we get a lot more mixed responses. So you can see how that varies with residential development being a little on the negative side, people probably feeling the pressures of growth just a bit. And speaking of growth, we've asked people in all these cities, how do you feel? How did you describe the current rate of population growth? And 83% of our respondents said too fast. For economic development, sometimes we see that as quite different, but here we're also seeing just over half, 56%, says even economic development, which we often think of a great goal for cities to be focusing on, but you've got some folks saying even that economic development may be a little too fast. Now, we don't know quite what they mean by economic development, but it's something you could look into further. So when you compare with the rest of these are these different Utah League of Cities and Towns caucus groups. That's how we organize our cities. Although with a 23% growth rate, you could easily be in that rapid growth caucus as well. And sometimes cities will caucus in multiple groups. But we have you in the Rural Hub group. And for that, you're really right up there on par with a place like Moab in terms of thinking about this relationship between population growth and economic growth in particular, very much like some of the other places that are really growing rapidly. We've asked a variety of concerns. Are these things concerns for you? And we highlight here to the right side of that middle line those things that are of a moderate, or the percentage that's a moderate or a major concern for respondents. Water supply tops the list. We've seen that shoot up from the 50s and 60% in other cities all the way up into the 80s and 90s this year. It's just really been, over the last few years, rising in concern for folks. Also up high there, roads and transportation, affordable housing, public safety, opportunities for youth, access to public land and access to quality food. Suicide's actually very high on this list for Tremont compared to some other cities. Recreation opportunities, and even air quality, where I think you guys do quite a bit better than some of the other Wasatch Front and Cache Valley communities, but you still have folks concerned about that to a certain extent. And almost all of these other things above the majority, or at least above 50%. Climate change is the one thing that fewer people are concerned about here. And then we do ask people, what do you value about your city? They love the farmland, the ties to agriculture, that social climate. They really love the small town rural feel, how friendly people are. They feel safe for the most part in your community. They love the peace and quiet. We also ask people to share their additional comments on well-being. These come in positive and negative and all over the place. We have shared these comments with your city managers, and hopefully they have shared them with you or will share them with you. There's pages and pages and pages and pages of them. And we just give them to you raw so that you can see what your residents are saying. But these are a list of some of the things that those comments are related to. So I'd urge you to look into those a little bit more. And with that, I thank you, and we're happy to answer any questions. We will not be doing surveys in 2023. We're going to take a break. Survey fatigue is very real. We don't want to overburden your residents. We'd love to have you partner in 2024. We're going to be working with the data more. We have so much data, and also working with these other interests. And we have to do some fundraising because we've been doing this project on a very low budget. It's expanding, and so we're going to be doing some fundraising to try to help support so that we can continue to support all of you as we move on into the future. So I'd love to take any comments or questions that you have. Thanks for your time.
I will just say that as I had 2 hours yesterday to spend in that room with many wonderful and concerned citizens, I understood why Tremont looked the way that it did. And I think I mentioned, growth. And as a city council, we've really been working on our ability to communicate and our abilities to listen. And we've formed that as something that we know we need to work on. So as you shared this data, it didn't surprise me at all. I mean, because we've heard it in this room. And so I appreciated this data, and just to help us to kind of another way of kind of recognizing what's going on in Tremont.
Yes,
So
thank you. Wonderful. And I would just note that some of the cities say, well, actually, we've put a lot of effort into that. But you realize people might not know. And so you can take some of the data and say, this is where we might want to work on our messaging. On some of them, where you want to learn more, because this kind of gives you an overview. And if any of these topics you want to dig in, we do also allow communities to ask additional questions that are just unique to the city. And so we can incorporate that as well. So.
We had the opportunity of also doing another survey with, we're working on a branding project, and in that survey, some similar questions were asked, and there was a lot of similar responses. So there's a lot of correlation between two separate, projects that we looked into, how people feel about the community and that kind of thing. So we appreciate very much your time and all the effort and everything that you put in. Any other questions for Courtney?
It's good data.
Okay, you're very welcome.
Thank you, Courtney.
And just mention that I'm teaching a class next semester called Building Community Environmental Resilience. And I think I've heard from Mark that there's some interest in being one of the city partners on that. We would have a small team of students do a deeper dive and look into some of the issues that you would like a little more work, some more resources, more data collection if necessary. So I'll work with your city managers to figure out where we want to go with
We'd love to
that.
work with you on that.
Oh, that'd be great. I look forward to it. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Okay, 5-year review of Tremont City accomplishments. Sean, you're going to share that with us?
Just as a preface, this really came out of me looking back at the last 5 years in the context of on the agenda is the city manager's contract and appointment, and so I wanted to give an accountability of what we've accomplished. And when I say we, I'm kind of thinking about the council and the city managers and department heads too. But the source of the data really came back from looking at ordinances that we've adopted or resolutions. And there's many other accomplishments that aren't up here that department heads have accomplished, within their own departments. I'm hoping that you're aware of some of those, and we can certainly think of other things that we've accomplished. But with that as a preface, let me just jump in to, and it's interesting, a lot of what was just discussed by Courtney is also included in here. There's a lot of parallel. And as you know, this last 5 years, the city's seen a lot of growth. And that was, I think that sort of dominates some of the accomplishments, is trying to keep up with the growth within the city. So this is just a snapshot that shows roughly the amount of money that we've spent in water projects, 8.4 million. And, honestly, you think it's easy to spend money, and it takes a lot of effort and time, from getting it appropriated through the council. You can see some of the biggest expenses have come through bonds, and there's a lot of work, as you know, to go through the bonding process, from setting rates to, writing the narratives to advertising the bonds and all of that. And obviously, you were a big part of those processes. But this is what it's yielded, and these are numbers that Paul, provided to me, and it's essentially connections. So that's not necessarily, and correct me if I'm wrong, Paul, but that's not connections per se that people have connected. Those are connection drops. And the other thing that's interesting with what Paul has shown here in the analysis is equivalent residential connections, because some of these areas serve green space or multifamily, and so Paul converted it into an ERC. But that was fairly impressive, I thought, as far as what we've done within 5 years to expand secondary water within the city. Paul, is there anything to add or clarify on that note? Yeah.
Go ahead.
I was just gonna say that, having attended your city and towns meetings, there are many cities that haven't even started secondary water, that haven't even begun to think about it. And they can't possibly have plenty of water, because we're in the middle of a drought. We live in Utah, right? And so I was thrilled that we were so, I should say, maybe ahead of the game. Could see it, looking ahead.
Just one quick question, Paul. How many more connections before we're finished?
How many more? We have a total of 3,930 units. So, because that counts multiple family units too. So probably as we look at connections, we're probably about another 1,000 at this point away from having everything pretty much. I mean, a lot of it doesn't count commercial businesses on Main Street because those don't use secondary water. So we wouldn't expense the money to dig up Main Street to do that. So probably around 1,000.
We're about 2/3 of the way there.
Yeah.
A lot of that
What
is
area is that?
The area that's left once we get through
east of the
will
river.
be east of the Malad River, and then the core part of town here south of town, which has those smaller lots. That's why we put that kind of at the very back. And then the very west hillside, which is going to mean some major infrastructure to lift water up to that area. And hopefully, as development comes, that'll be paid for through a lot of development on that whole hillside there.
Using developers before they even start.
Well, that's part of the requirement.
Exactly.
So-
I had the opportunity to meet with, or to go to this Great Salt Lake. They're talking about the Great Salt Lake and the level of it and everything. And but I had the chance to meet with Joel Ferry, who is now over the natural resources, and this is not going unnoticed. Those folks are recognizing that the efforts that we're making here and appreciate what we're doing. So it's not going unnoticed from the state and that kind of thing.
So transportation projects, as you know, this is something that is important to the residents, and in some areas we've made great strides, but as you know, we still have other projects that we need to work towards funding. So, almost 1.1 million in transportation grants the city's received in that 5-year period, with about $800,000 that we received from CMAQ funds that the city, and these were things that we proactively as a city have sought after. But about 800,000 of those are from congestion mitigation air quality funds, and we reworked the Iowa String Main Street, and the balance of that was in corridor preservation funds. You know, the city being proactive, creating a transportation master plan, and then trying to preserve those corridors ahead of development. And about 4.1 acres were preserved. On the construction side, with the Rocky Mountain Power's electrical franchise agreement, you know, we got a stronger commitment than we ever have, and identified projects that we anticipate needing to relocate their electrical facilities and getting them to commit in conjunction with entering into that agreement that they would move those facilities, which is, I think, really important because it does save a lot on construction cost as we move forward towards implementation. So this is just a snapshot, and it's kind of hard to see, but it's so easy to forget. But this is just a street view, and as you know, the south leg of Iowa String only had 2 traffic lanes, and those were expanded to 3 traffic lanes, with each turning movement getting their own dedicated lane, and essentially cleaning up the frontage of Maverick. And so I think aesthetically it's improved that corner, along with the way that it functions from a traffic perspective. So the redevelopment agency, and as you know, you serve in that role. Essentially, this is us vacating 650 West, developing 600 West. We spent about $245,000, and that was all in an effort to as an economic development project, to have Crump Reese redevelop their property and expand their dealership, which, as everyone knows, there's a lot of sales tax generated on automobile sales. Of that $245,000 that were spent, $138,000 will be reimbursed through transportation impact fees, with tax increment also being an option for reimbursement. We demoed 3 homes to help the viability of Tremont Center, which is probably our most active commercial and economic development site. And we also got into a second position there for reimbursement. So we improved the frontage and just sort of the viability, I think, of development continuing there. And we also got a 2-year extension for the Tremont CDA, and I estimate that at about $300,000 right now, the worth of that to the city. And those are the last 2 years, and so frankly, you know, taxable value in those last 2 years are going to far exceed what we're currently getting, which is about $150,000. So that's why I pegged it at that amount. So community development projects, without going into the details, we essentially got $230,000 in community development grants to help further some of the projects in the community. Negotiated open space and public infrastructure. You know, with all the development that's been occurring, you know, the city has developed plans, and we've tried to, as development occurs, to negotiate and secure open space and infrastructure that are needed. And the value in doing that is we try to get those lands ahead of the cost increase that occurs when we annex property into the city and it becomes serviceable. But essentially, you know, I estimate that there's about $300,000 of negotiated open space improvements that developers have contributed to the Central Trail, and you can see the itemized list there of what those improvements are and what they total. So open space, this is again negotiated with developers as part of getting their entitlements. You know, I pegged it at about $211,000. That's based upon using the per acreage amount of $20,000, $30,000. And as you know, we recently purchased property for over $62,000, and that was already within the city entitled. And so that's why it's so important that we secure this open space, ahead of annexing and ahead of increasing the value. So I feel like these numbers that we're talking about here are pretty conservative, based upon essentially what the value of the land is now. So this is also true for water shares, and this isn't necessarily shares that serve the development. This is shares that developers have contributed to the city that serve either existing open space for the city or future open space. So 26.2 shares have been contributed by developers, and I use the multiplier of $5,000 a share. And, that's the lowest I've seen. I think it's probably north of that. We've also negotiated with developers that they contribute to our parks, and this is a cash contribution by the developer. This is not impact fees, and that's about $632,000 that the city will receive in the future. As these developments occur at recordation, they'll pay this amount, which is tied to inflation, so it'll continue to increase depending upon the timing of when they develop. So we also purchased open space, and that was, that $800,000 that we finalized that, which was needed for storm drain and open space in that quadrant of the city. And that's just the breakout of essentially 7.5 acres of park space and 5.7 acres of storm drainage. But hopefully the idea is that they're designed seamlessly into a larger open space. So in total, grants and developer contributions, through this 5-year period, we've captured about $2.5 million. And we've acquired 28.3 acres of open space from trail corridor there to some park and storm drain basins, and totaling that 28. So the other thing that's really worth noting, and something that we talked about in great detail in our work session, is public safety and how important it is, and some of the things that we've done to shore up public safety. And as you know, there's still much to be done as the city continues to grow and to reach a level of service that we're satisfied with. But the United Policing Department, I pegged that at about $400,000 based upon 4 officers at about $100,000 that we receive in contribution, or Garland's contribution. So I feel like it's a significant arrangement as long as we can work together and it meets both cities' needs. I think it's a real enhancement. We've had to do some work lately to shore that up and get some commitments, and the chief has done a great job in getting that partnership consistent with our agreement that we have in the local agreement, and to sort of meet each other's objectives. So the other thing is, as you know, we've created a full-time fire and EMS, and that was just the start, because we knew that calls were going to continue to grow and we'd need some more help. So anyways, you know more about that, and there's more to come as we talk about it going forward. So the other thing is that we've been able to recruit some great public safety leadership for the city, and we have a great opportunity to put the expertise that Chief Cordova and Lacroix have into practice and really build up our public safety. As you know, we also have some great department heads that have been with the city, over that 5-year period, beyond that 5-year period. So that's all that I had. But I've appreciated working on these projects and working with you on these projects, and I I feel like there's a lot of things to be pleased about, acknowledging that there's still a lot more work to be done in the upcoming years.
But no more names added to that.
No.
Thank you, Sean. Any comments for Sean? Any questions or comments?
Thanks.
All right. Very good. Public comments. This is your opportunity to address the city council regarding any concerns or questions that you might have. We will make every effort to, if you've got a concern or question that needs to be addressed, we'll make every effort to address that question for you. Time is now yours.
For my birthday, I have a request. Now, so at the intersection of 600 North and 300 East, so it's right by the Stake Center, we're wondering if there is any possibility of crosswalks. Because we can't get out of the Holmgren Estates, we can't get across that highway for our kids to be able to walk to school or get bikes across. And it's been an issue since we moved here, almost 5 years ago. But it's been kind of a manageable thing. But even my high schooler isn't comfortable getting her little sister across that road, like to come from school. And we watch kids as traffic has increased, because we all know it's increased a lot. As it increases, it's really becoming a scary safety hazard. And especially in the mornings when schools, we have the high school, the middle school, we have North Park, we have Athenian, we have Alice C. Harris, and we have cars coming from just every direction. Yeah. And it's really, really scary. And all of those kids, we just watch them stand there just hoping that nobody hits them, because the cars are going so fast. It's not even a situation where people can, make eye contact. You teach your kids that you make eye contact with the driver, make sure they see you. But there's really no opportunity to do that because the road is just so wide. You just can't do that. So I know it's probably tricky with it being a state road on 300 East. So I don't know if it's something that we have to ask the state for or what, but it really, and also even on Sundays, there's a lot of families that we see that try to walk across there coming the other direction, coming east to go to that stake center. And it's the same thing, some of those people are hauling a lot of kids across the road and they're just trailing behind, and you just hope they don't get ran over because people drive so fast down that road. So if there were any chance to do that, that
Paul,
would be
I
very
know
appreciated.
over here on Main Street, we had the sort of the crosswalk and the light.
We have to put a request in with UDOT.
Is that how that works?
All that. And I know they're gonna say, well, if they go one block north, they have a crosswalk there. They'll wanna throw that out. Or either, maybe it's actually 2 blocks.
I would say it's a long block.
So we can make that request to them and see, but we don't have the right to go put stripes down or put a sign up or anything without their blessing.
Can you follow through with that a little bit?
We can
Yeah.
follow up.
And just to add to what Paul's saying, what I anticipate they'll do is they'll do a warrant study, and they won't tell you when they're going to come out and do it, but they'll come out and observe how many people cross the crosswalk in a certain period of time, and if it meets certain criteria, then based upon how many do cross, they'll apply some kind of improvement potentially.
Okay.
I mean, they might come back to us and say, it doesn't meet it, but if you'll put the signs up, we'll allow it to happen.
It's close.
That's what we did
Yeah.
on Main Street, if that didn't warrant, even though we had kids hit, they wouldn't put up any signaling, we had to do all that and own the responsibility of maintaining it and stuff.
But even putting in the crosswalk, though, that would be something they would have to
They'd
approve.
Yeah, because they have their standards and they use a tape, they don't paint it, they'll heat apply a tape and stuff, so.
Okay.
So, yeah, have to get their blessing.
We'll try.
Yeah,
Try.
We'll make the request to them.
And you want it on Sixth, huh?
Yeah.
Yeah, 6th North.
I'd say because, I mean, you figure that straight down to LSC Harris, those kids coming out of that neighborhood, that's where they would head.
Well, and they, it's a little different, people are shifting over to go to the high school and to even North Park a little bit. But like our kids, I know there's a lot of other kids in our neighborhood that go up to Athenian, and that's K through 9.
Down that same street.
And then on to Alice C. Harris, and it's just getting increasingly scary. And on Halloween, we had to like shine lights for people to get across that road. I mean, it's scary.
Okay.
But we've always known it was probably tricky because it's a state road, so we've never asked, but it's kind of to that point where I think we should ask.
Sounds good to me. We'll follow through and see what we can figure out. Anybody else? Well, thank you for that. We'll see what we can get done. Okay, new council business. Let's see, discussion and consideration of adopting resolution number 22-55, appointing Sean Warnke as city manager and approving the terms and conditions of a city manager agreement between Tremont City and Sean Warnke. Sean, do you want to kind of?
My contract and appointment will end in the spring, and this is the opportunity for the council to consider if you would like to reappoint me to fill that position. We've typically done 5-year periods of time. The contract is remaining the same with one exception that I've requested, which is essentially to allow me to apply my car allowance to my base salary, and that helps my retirement because allowances aren't included in the URS calculation, the Utah Retirement System calculation. And so you would pay an extra contribution amount on that of $1,611. I can't remember. I put in the staff report. I think it's like $1,100 annually. Dustin's reviewed the contract and didn't really see anything beyond, didn't have anything to say as far as, concerns from his perspective. And he was looking for it, in relationship to form and different things like that. So, with that, you can consider it. You could table it and discuss it. You could go into closed session if you feel like you need to talk a little bit more about the issue, as it points to my character and competency. So, I think those are some of the options for you.
Sean, I gotta bring up one thing, and we giggled about it one day before I ever run for office, But I have heard from numerous people that they feel our city manager should live in town. A little more ownership towards the city. I know that, I think it was these guys that would have given you the exception to, I don't understand if we make the 2 chiefs live in town and all of that, and I just wasn't here to why you don't have to do that no more.
Yeah, I mean, it was just an exception that they granted, and as I looked at different housing, I chose a house that suited, my family's needs and with that allowance. So, obviously I'm there now, and,
But you can see what people think. They think, well, if your city manager don't want to live here, why is he the city manager? And I'm going by what I'm getting comments from.
Yeah, I can understand that. I mean, I think there's some valid points for me to live in the city and for me to live outside the city. But I understand it comes up. People question me about it too. So, I understand what you're saying. I don't disagree. I beyond the fact that that's where I'm at now, I don't have anything
We can find an
else to
apartment.
say.
I noticed in the job description it's required. So if we hired someone else, they would be required to stay here. It's an exception for you. Correct?
That's correct. Yeah, we made an,
I don't think I think if you look at,
Not in the job description, and it says they must live in Tremont.
yeah, and I guess what I was going to say is in the ordinance itself. And I'm not trying to, if you guys, ultimately, I guess you need to make a decision. And I'm not trying to justify it, it's just what happened and it's where I'm at. And I know it's a concern.
Right.
Well, I think in the ordinance, it needs to be changed back to the city manager needs to live in town. Now, it's not saying you need to live in town, but any future jobs that replace you, I feel strongly need to live within Tremont and city boundaries because, they need to take on some of the liability and some of the risk and some of the pain as everyone else that lives here. Especially if they're making decisions or requesting increased taxes and all that kind of stuff, Those were some decisions that were made beyond this council, and so we're not going to go back there, but we can change that in the ordinance, can't we?
Yeah, absolutely. That's, that's what governs, not necessarily the job description per se.
any other comments, council?
I would like to do a closed session for 5 minutes. I have an idea.
Okay. With that, council, I guess we'll entertain a motion.
Make a motion that we go ahead.
A motion by Rick.
Second it.
Second by Lyle Vance.
It won't take long.
With a short, closed session. We'll get back to you in just a minute.